sure. I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah.
It's very hard to get it in. Okay. Okay, good. So welcome back and welcome Dean. Nice to see you. I've thought about how we should proceed because I must say I didn't realize how much of a holiday that actually was. When you told me that there were no restaurants in the area, wow! I thought this was. Don't worry about. I'm not. I have 2 kids. They are grown up now, but I know that. But no, I mean, I thought Vietnam was kind of a 24/7 type of country where everything was running all the time.
Just because of this area is quite, it's not near the central zone of Vineyard.
Okay.
So this whole kind of town is quite, not so many activities.
Okay, I see. So I suggest to proceed as follows, just to give you a perspective. I think that I mean, usually we have, after the lunch break, we have this an hour and a half of people working on the problem sets, and then we discuss them together. And I think that this is useful. But maybe today we do it otherwise, and we spend the first half of the afternoon doing these problem sets together, which might mean that we're done earlier than originally planned. But I think it would be for one, it would be a pain in the neck just to take care of your daughter and to try to solve problem sets. And since this is 25% of the audience or 20%, so I'll basically I have a problem set for today, and that has an empirical part, which is essentially a data part, where I want to draw your attention to a certain data set, which is very useful on demographic data. I have one theory thing, and I'll show you how to handle that. And then we might actually be done by 4:30 or 3, if that's fine with you. Okay, and then it's not because I want to enjoy the holiday, right? Don't get me wrong. It's not. I'm very motivated, but I don't want to, make this too stressful for all of us. Okay, so let's talk about another component that becomes very important in OLG models, namely budget deficits, right? And we talk about budget deficits, overlapping generations, and Ricardian equivalence. Now recall, in the infinite horizon representative consumer model, a change in the time path of government spending and taxation did not affect the current account as long as it did not affect the effective interest rate, for example, or the representative consumer's intertemporal budget constraint. Now, to be frank, you haven't seen that yet, and so I will devote half an hour to showing you kind of the power of Ricardian equivalence. Ricardian equivalence, by the way, goes back to David Ricardo, big founding father of classical economics. And the rationale of Ricardian equivalence is that if the budget deficit increases, agents anticipate higher tax burden in the future and adjust private savings. So if the government, in a Ricardian world, if the government says, look, I keep spending the same amount of money, but I just stop raising taxes for the next 5 years, a rational consumer says, okay, I'm not paying taxes for 5 years, but it's not that the government gives this to me for free. After 5 years, the government has to come back and raise even higher taxes. And so currently, I will increase private savings. Now remember that on the first day, I said the current account can be written as private savings minus private investment minus GT minus TT. Now, Ricardian equivalence says that STP is equal to, or let me put this differently, that SDP I'm improvising. Never improvise in front of class, particularly not on a public holiday. That if the budget deficit goes up, private savings completely dominates it, and so the current account doesn't move at all. So this is, of course, a super extreme thing, but it says the naive conjecture that if the budget deficit goes up, then the current account goes down is wrong. If Ricardian equivalence holds, then the increase in the budget deficit will completely be compensated by an increase in private savings, and so the current account doesn't move at all. That's a surprising finding, but that's what, I mean, in economics we often have these very extreme benchmark theories, and then we can say, there's a lot of reasons why not to believe in that, and why we should have, a lot other things might be at work. But it's important to have these benchmarks. So the question is, how does a temporary budget deficit affect the current account if agents have a finite time horizon, that is in an OLG framework? Now, the point I want to make is that once we have an overlapping generations framework, Ricardian equivalence breaks down, and all of a sudden we have a role for budget deficits, for fiscal policy to affect the current account. Good. Let me give you an example. Suppose we have a small open economy with perfect capital, international capital mobility. Agents live for 2 periods, right? So they're never children. They're born, they start working, then they retire. We assume that the population size is constant, so there's always just one person around. Multiplied by 1,000 or 1 million doesn't change a lot. The initial government debt is 0. In period 2, the government announces that in period 3, it will pay a debt finance transfer of 0.5 goods units to all agents currently alive. That is T3 equals -1. Now, this deserves some explanation. Now, this is the tax. Now, if the tax is negative, it means that the government doesn't take money from you, but it gives you money. So it's a transfer. So, all right. In all subsequent periods, so for s greater or equal to 4, the government raises taxes to cover the interest payments on its debt. That is, in all subsequent periods, Ts equals R for s being greater or equal to 4. So it's like the government is very generous at one point in time, and then it takes back money in subsequent periods. Note the government never actually repays its debt, but it makes the due interest payments. So there's no Ponzi game, right? The Ponzi game only happens if you do not repay and you do not make the interest payments. Now, please note that the present value of this transfer and tax sequence is 0. Right? So you can show, and that's actually what I'm going to show, that if you compute the present value of these tax and transfers, then you get a 0. Now let me show this to you, right? Because it's not obvious. Right? So in period 3, people get a transfer, so the taxes are negative. And starting in period 4 up to the infinite future, people have to pay R. Well, this one person. So let me crank that out. So that's